Hey, it's me. It's Micah. OKC finally did it. After years of rebuilding, the Thunder finally brought it home, a championship, and I know today's guest was watching every moment of it. But while we love a good highlight reel, not everything that matters is happening on the court. Let's be real. Between nonstop alerts, breaking news banners, and TikTok hot takes, it's hard to know what to tune into and what to tune out. I've honestly muted most of my notifications, including the news ones that I used to rely on as a reporter, because the overstimulation, it's just too much. Even Netflix and Shein gotta chill. But here's the thing, I've also had to face the fact that there is a lot happening around me, especially locally, that deserves my attention. So, how do we stay politically and socially aware without spiraling into anxiety? This week on Being with Micah, I'm joined by Jordan Ryan, a news anchor, reporter, former NBA dancer for OKC, and new mom who gets it. We're diving into how to create a healthy relationship with the news, why local reporting still matters, and how to cut through the noise without losing yourself in the scroll. If you've ever found yourself over it but still trying to care, this episode is for you. Let's get into it. Jordan, I am so glad you're here. For folks listening who don't know, you and I go way back to our early journalism days, and I've always admired how you balance your career, passions, and now motherhood. Before we get into it, can you share a bit about yourself for our listeners?
Yes, Micah, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited. I am right now living in Oklahoma City and I work for a local news station here. I'm a weekend morning anchor and then a reporter 3 days a week. I also used to dance for the Oklahoma City Thunder, which is really exciting right now because last night they won the NBA
Yes.
championship for the first time. So it's a really exciting time here in this city and it's really special. I'm a mom of a 1.5-year-old and then I'm pregnant with my second. So lots going on, but I met Micah, I met you at Arizona State, like you said, and man, it's been a while. It's crazy.
I know it's been such a long time, but I always was so just at awe with how you balanced Cronkite and then you were dancing in Arizona as well, and just like how you made that happen.
Yeah, I feel like you were such a go-getter too, so it's really sweet of you to say that because you were traveling all around doing the different bureaus and things like that. But yeah, I always had a passion. Some of us have multiple passions, and I think that's a beautiful thing in life. And dance was always one of those for me. And so I danced for the Arizona Rattlers while I went to Arizona State. Prior to that, I was on a college dance team for Grand Canyon, but switching to Cronkite was necessary for my career. And so in that time, I danced for Arizona Rattlers, which is an arena football team, and then went on to dance for the Thunder eventually, once I got here.
Well, that is amazing. And I can only imagine how you felt watching last night, seeing that OKC won their first championship. Like, that's huge.
Yeah.
Well, let's get started with
Okay.
the obvious. So many people today are just over it when it comes to the news. I know me personally, I have felt that way before as well. And as someone that also reported the news, it's really important for us to become balanced in the way that we're going about consuming. Between the Apple News notifications, breaking alerts, and TikTok trauma dumps, it feels like
Right.
information overload. How do you personally manage that both as a journalist and a mom?
I feel that first off, 100%. It's hard to know what is balance in this, and that may look different for everyone. And it's hard to know when to stop or when to actually consume it because you can get so good at tuning out the news and tuning out updates and things like that that you may have no idea what's going on. Two ends of the spectrum, I feel like there, and it's hard to find what's going to work for you or find balance in the middle. For me personally, I report, like I said, 3 days a week, and then I anchor on the weekends. So 3 days a week, I have one story that I'm more so focused on. And then on the weekends, I have to make sure, obviously, that I'm well versed in everything going on here in Oklahoma and then nationally and internationally as well, especially with the stuff in Iran and everything like that. There's just there's a lot of headlines. So it can be hard to know, like, okay, when do I shut this off and stop talking about it or thinking
Right.
about it? And that may look different for everyone. But I can tell you what I kind of do just to get us started is for me on my 2 days off, I just don't worry about it. I try not to, at least. I just focus on being with my son and everything that I have to get done around the house mostly. But then when I'm at work and on those 5 days a week that I am working, I tend to consume a lot more. And I consume from a variety of sources personally. Again, this is something I obviously enjoy it and I have a little more time maybe than the average person. So, like, I personally love NPR. I love listening to them. I think it's calming. And I love I have to look and see what it is. I think it's Washington Post is one that's similar to an NPR feel, but it's a 13-minute national, international rundown of major headlines. And so I'll usually listen to that in the morning while I'm getting ready for work. And there's one more. I think I listened to the NPR one too there. I listen to NPR like on my local radio, my local NPR. And then I'll like skim my local news, see what the other stations are doing and New York Times and things like that. People may not have time for that, but that's kind of what I like to do. And then eventually I just shut it off. I'm just like, okay, we can pick this back up tomorrow. I need to move on. So yeah.
Well, I like that you share that one, you have multiple sources for
Mhm.
which you get your news from, which is really important, especially in this day and age when there's just so much going on and it's a lot to keep up with. But what I really love that you shared is that you listen to your news. And I think that audio is becoming increasingly a more popular form
Mhm.
for people to digest news as
Mhm.
we've gotten away from newspapers. When I first thought about coming into the Cronkite program, I truly thought journalism was just newspapers, and I was very disinterested in that. But seeing that there's other ways to go about consuming news really helps other people to be able to try and add that into their lives with listening to it while you're
Mhm.
driving or while you're getting ready. It's not like you have to sit down and read an article, so you can be behind the wheel still or actively getting ready, getting the kids together, and still getting your daily dose of news. How has your relationship with news changed since you became a parent?
I feel like I care more than I did before. And because it's going to impact my son and especially local news, like local education things and things happening in schools. There's all sorts of stuff that goes on within your community and decisions that are made by very, very hyper local legislators or even your city council or whatever. Your school board, they're making decisions that are now going to impact me and my family. I feel like I take more of an interest, even more so than I did when I was younger. And I think that's normal for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, as you get older, you learn the ways in which a lot of what's happening is going to impact you, especially as you start to build a family. Like
Mhm.
those local decisions that are being made to do with, the school board and what kind of education your kids are going to be able to receive.
Mhm.
It's really important to stay in the know about what that's going to look like and how it's going to impact the way your kids receive education on a day to day basis. I think
Mhm.
that's really important for people to think about when they're deciding to go about choosing to mute and kind of keep the news notifications completely on pause, but also deciding when to check back in to stay up to date. And I think a lot of times things happen in our communities. We don't realize a lot of it was, something that was discussed. There was like an article or, there was a town hall meeting that a local journalist may have covered that you could
Right.
have participated in, and then you're kind of left to deal with the aftermath of what can I do now? And a lot of times it's too late. And
Right.
that's the whole point of this, is to
kind of help people understand why, at the end of the day, the news matters. Yes, it's coming from 1,000 different sources,
Mhm.
and there's so many ways that we can get the news. Like Jordan was saying, she typically gets hers from NPR and Washington Post and listening to her local NPR radio station as well.
Right.
According to Pew Research, nearly 50% of US adults are getting their news online, which is great. We're
Right.
staying connected, and 30% are getting it from social media, while
Mhm.
only 16 are really relying on cable. I was definitely a cable cutter.
Yeah, me too. I get it.
Staying connected online has always been the way that I've gotten my news. Does
Mhm.
that surprise you, those stats?
No, not at all. And like we have YouTube TV, so we can still watch all of our local stations. I think a lot of people have that option. And I think it doesn't like worry me or concern me. I think that people may, as they get older, like our generation, you may start to revert back to what you grew up with a little bit, because you know how they say they can't stop you from becoming your parents on that commercial. I think we go back to some of our comforts as a child, and so I feel like some of our generation may in the next couple of years go back to whatever their parents used to do. And personally, I think I feel like morning news won't go away. And I don't look at all of the ratings for our station all the time, but because that's a way, it's really easy for people to just grab some headlines and grab some information before they head out the door, because it's quick and they can just put it on in the background. Of course, I think evening news, I'm sure there's a lot of people. I think it's because I grew up with morning news. Like, that's mainly what we watched was in the morning. So that's probably the only reason I say that. Maybe you watch evening news, but that's kind of my point, is you kind of revert to maybe what your family did. And then as far as online, stations are very aware, your local news stations are very aware of that now. They're always a little late. They should have been really focused on this years ago, but now, including my station, most stations in this market are very focused on reaching people online. I can tell you that that's a huge portion of their plan. And it comes, I mean, not to get too in the weeds for our time. I'm just saying that this, it comes down to money, and they needed money from advertisements. And I don't think that they were quick enough to think of ways, because we know there's ways to make money online, ways to leverage online and get there faster for people, but they're figuring it out now. So, for example, with my daily uh, agenda of things that I have to do, I have to post on my station's Instagram story every day and preview what I'm doing. Um, and then I personally use TikTok a lot, and I have my own personal TikTok, which is kind of a news TikTok, and I post on there, and I have been for years posting on there just rundowns of breaking news and stories that I'm working on, or big stories of the day. And I will get comments all the time from people who say, I have not heard this on my local news. And it's so funny because they just maybe don't pick up who I am. And I'm like, no, I literally am your local news. This was shared because that's exactly where I'm getting this information from. I'll say this, it's hard to keep up with everything. It's impossible for even me. It's impossible for anyone, because the way that shows run, they run in 30-minute blocks on your local news, and they can only get a certain amount of stories in that time. And so you are not expected, I would hope, that you're not watching every single newscast. And so you may miss something if you're watching it live and think they're not covering this. And I can give some examples of that. Just super quick, my station personally, and this is different from where I was because I just switched over 6 months ago. Um, they in the mornings do not run things that they believe would be sensitive to parents or children if they're.
Mm,
And so sometimes they may not, and I'm not saying I agree or disagree on this, but this is just the way they do it. They may not run a story involving a rape or something, just a sexual assault, something more sensitive like that. in the morning, even if it's a major story. And so people may think if they watch in the morning only, they may think we don't know about it, we're not covering it, but it's just the fact of that's not what they do in the early mornings, if that makes sense.
It completely makes sense. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't look at from the news perspective of, when you're watching news in the morning, possibly you're getting ready for school, people are
Yeah,
getting ready for work. And while that information is, important to know about what's happening in your community, it could be very triggering or disruptive to a family who has young
right,
children at home who don't really know what that language is, and going into the school day and being taking that with them. The news has to be considerate of
right,
how they give the news, and they don't want to go about triggering you first thing in the morning. So that is
mhm,
something that is to think about when the time of day is that you're consuming news, and checking in periodically. Obviously, no one's expected to watch every single live news
right.
broadcast unless you're, retired and sitting at home with the TV on all day. But being aware that there's likely to be different content at different parts of the day based on that alone.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things as we're talking about oversaturation and social media. That's one of kind of the benefits of the morning news or excuse me, of your local news is they're just going to give you kind of the meat of things. It's going to be really quick and they're going to move on to the next thing. And it is a little more sensitive to the family or they're gonna and not censor out in a way of things that are important, but censor out in a way of things that just you don't need to carry that burden as a random person not related to the situation, you know? And
Hmm.
sometimes on social media, I mean, for me, it's overwhelming. People just, they overshare and it ends up being gossip more so than journalism when
Hmm.
it's the neighbor or, someone sharing a personal story. It's more so gossip at that point and it can be overwhelming and they can add a lot of details. And I mean, even you could argue even the news can sometimes overshare, but for the most part they're at least having conversations about what their information they're putting out there. So that can be a difference of social media versus your local news outlets that are going to make sure you're getting what you need to know and not more than that. It's not going to be gossip.
Yeah, that's really important. And like when you mentioned, a lot of times you'll get comments on your TikTok where
Mhm.
people are like, "Oh my goodness, like why isn't my local news station talking about this?" Like I see those all the time
Right.
where, outlets are posting stuff online, and they're
Mhm.
like, "Why hasn't my, station talked about this, or why haven't I heard this anywhere else?" And I think it's just a matter of you're more reachable through
Yeah.
the digital platform, and this is
Right.
how you're receiving it now for the first time.
Right.
And as we know, TikTok has become increasingly like a
Mhm.
huge base for people to get news from and get updates, and not just published journalists are on there, and
Mhm.
news outlets. There's, I guess you'd call them like influencer journalists kind of thing, people who take on that role and, give you updates on court cases that are happening.
Right.
I see a lot of court case updates on what's happening with Diddy's
Mhm.
trial. And, while that can be helpful just to stay in the know, it's really important to think about and kind of do your own fact checking and research on your own time. I'm curious what you think are the pros and the cons of how people consume news today, especially when it comes to that generational difference, like TikTok versus TV.
I can give you a good example that just happened to me this week was there was a man who worked for the city of Oklahoma City and he worked at the water treatment plants. And he posted a video that just went viral here about the water with he was basically reading something he had written and it was really long like imagine like a long email with a lot of different like gosh what's the word I'm looking for like slang that only he would know, terms
Hmm.
that only he would know because he worked in water treatment codes and stuff like that. Anyway, so he goes on and on and on about how the water in Oklahoma City is bad and the EPA or whatever is trying to cover it up. Just all of these allegations. And so it got, at this point, it has way more than this, but it got at least at the time, and it had only been up for like a day, like 200,000 views, 27,000 likes, and people were tagging me in it, and people were commenting like, protect this man at all costs, just all of this stuff. And I'm not stating whether his allegations were necessarily true or untrue. That's not my point in this. But so I reach out to the city and I share the video with them, and I ask them for a statement on it. And while I did this, I looked up his name. Well, turns out in 2023, we had done a story on this guy, and he had made terrorism threat. Well, he was, let me say this, not terrorism threats, excuse me. The charge was something under terrorism. That's why I say that. But he had threatened on Facebook to taint the water in Oklahoma City. And it was terrorism hoax was his charges, because he had said that he was going to contaminate the city's
Wow.
water. And so he obviously has a vendetta against the city, and there's more to the story, but people don't know that. And so they're like, people that I know and care about are like, oh my gosh, Jordan, you have to see this. And they're believing him. And I'm not saying I'm not investigating. I haven't investigated it. And I'm not trying to say that everything he's saying is completely untrue. I just don't know. But people are just blindly believing everything that he's saying because he shared this post. And I commented, and because my station is there was a lot going on that day, other stuff that happened, and then they're very careful to not create concern when there doesn't need to be concern. So the city gave me a statement and they didn't end up running the story. So I didn't post anything about it. I just commented and I said, you may want to look up this guy's name on our court on or online and see some of the stories about him. But so that's a good example. And then I've seen other stuff, like you'll just see outlandish claims sometimes and people just believe them because you kind of can say anything you want now, is
Mm-hmm.
my point. And so there's another one where people have recently made claims about a brand new hotel here, saying that it's infested with bed bugs or whatever. And that was one we also didn't run a story on, where it's just like one person says it and then everyone kind of jumps on the bandwagon. And so my point in saying that is not everything that you see online is true. And most people are smart enough to realize that, but some people are really convincing. And
Mm-hmm.
it can be really hard to know. Like, this guy was convincing even for me at first, because he's reading all of these statements and these claims that he had filed and stuff. And that's why I'm not completely comfortable. Like, I'm not completely comfortable just saying everything he said is outlandish. That's not my point. I haven't looked into it, but my point is he was convincing, and he has these charges that are very serious charges, and they should be taken into consideration when you're considering believing someone. My point is that your local news, and your I hate to say media outlets, but they will look into things and be able to talk to people. That's what I'm trying to get at, is we have direct access to people. Not that you don't, as a citizen, have access to, but I just know the numbers and I know who to talk to and I know how to they're going to be quick to respond to me. And so I'm able to, and it may be someone, honestly, that you just may not be able to get access to. We do. And so we're able to get answers and clarification, and show truth is our goal. So that's my point in that. I kind of rambled.
No, that's perfect because it's so easy when you see someone that comes off as credible to just take them at face value. If they're
Mhm.
spewing off all this information that seems all great and dandy, like, oh, wow, where else did he get it from? If he's saying he filed all these reports, it's great to be like, oh, wow, this is going on, and kind of get in that habit of gossiping where then you just go and repeat it to somebody else.
Yeah.
And then now there's this narrative where people, on TikTok or wherever online, you can reshare information and repost these things. So then it gets out to a larger audience. Then it gets to the point where now people are tagging you. They're like, hey, you're our
Yeah.
local journalist. Like, why aren't you guys talking about this? Get on it. And
Yeah.
like you said, as a journalist, being with a syndicated news outlet, having that credibility to be able to get in front of these people and ask the right questions in
Right.
a timely fashion, whereas
Right.
the normal person doesn't really have that kind of access. Like, yeah, you might be able to get a response, but when the news station reaches out to you, chances are, if they're looking for a statement, they're going to respond back, even if it
Right.
is, we don't have a statement at this time. They're going to get back a lot quicker to you guys than someone just calling and questioning what's going on. And I think that's really important for people to think about when they're consuming their news, whether they're on social media or not. Like, where did this source come from, and whether or not it's credible. Someone can appear to be credible, but something as simple as like what you commented back and said, maybe you guys should look into this person. Google has a lot of information there. Just,
Mhm.
taking a you don't even have to do a deep dive. A lot of
Right.
times when you see something and it turns out to be fake news or whatever it is, or something odd to do with it, it pops up within that first Google search engine result page that you get, and you start getting more context. Like, there's so many things I've seen online where I'm like, what? Did this really happen? And then I go to Google, and AI is great. It's, improving as each day goes on, and how Google kind of has those like excerpts with AI pulling out the information very quickly, but still being able to scroll and see, like, yeah, okay, maybe there was more to this story that I didn't necessarily get from this one source. And with journalists, our goal is to report the truth. And
Right.
we're going to go about doing that by interviewing multiple people, not just one person.
Right.
And I think that's part of what comes with this digital distrust that we have right now, because, we're consuming things online and people are able to just put something in front of you, a story in front of you, and give it to you straight. But they're not necessarily sourcing anything. They're kind of just regurgitating some information that they found online and other articles that they have seen reported on it, and not necessarily done their own reporting. There's a whole process, and maybe some people don't think it's that serious or in depth, but you go through a lot of training on how to create a story using your own words and not regurgitating the same thing the next outlet is already reporting on. And I think that's a lot of what we see today, where you get these news influencers that are just repeating some of these headlines that they've already seen online, and kind of giving you the same information and not really adding much value. And I think social media is a great starting point to hear what's happening, but it also can be a lot of misinformation, like a misinformation trap. How do you think social media creators that are shaping this news help or hurt the public understanding?
That's a tough one for me. I mean, I get it. Like, I mean, there's just stuff that I don't follow, like entertainment news. I personally don't pay attention to, but I know there's a lot of influencers on that in that space. And then, like you were saying with the trials and things like that, the thing with the posting and the people that just post crimes and stuff like that, that may not be involved, it's fine if it's like something that's closed in my, well, gosh, this is a hard one. Talking about past cases is that are now completely closed and stuff, I don't see anything wrong with that. People who are talking about things that are currently happening, and they're probably getting that information from us anyways.
Right.
So they're probably reading their article directly from my local, if it's a local story, my local station or another local station here anyways. So it's tough. What concerns me more so is like people like just that are spouting claims more than anything that have maybe not very much of a base and people just believing them. But my thing is, I do think people are pretty smart overall. Like, I think that you can figure out what's true and what's not. It's just something to think about and consider, just like you said, doing a Google search and seeing if your for local stories, if your local station has covered it and whatnot. I think that can just be helpful. I don't know. It doesn't pop up on my feed a lot. I think I'm on Mom Talk mostly. Right now I'm on Oklahoma City Thunder TikTok, and so that's mainly what I see. I just don't pay attention to a lot of those people, so I don't typically consume it. I'm not the I'm probably not the best even to comment on what they're saying because I'll just skip past it if something like that pops up for the most part.
Well, that's good that you're not engaging with it. So it's keeping it out of your,
Out of my
your For You
feed.
page, out
Yeah.
of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
I think that's something to bring up too, though, that the more you engage with certain kind of content, the more likely the algorithm is to continue showing you that kind of content, whether you're watching the video, rewatching it, liking it, or commenting, or even going to that person's page. The
Right.
algorithm is keeping track of all of that
Mhm.
information and kind of spitting more back at you based on how you choose to go about it. And there are plenty of things that I've seen where I'm like, this is fake. And I just continue on. And I've gone back sometimes. I'm like, you know what? Let me just like report it because this is like fake information. This is actually
Yeah,
not
that's good.
helpful for anybody.
Yeah.
But I am too, like, once I see it and I confirm on my own, I'm like, okay, I'm done engaging with it because it's not something that I want to continue having a part of my daily feed of things that I consume, which, depending on what social media network you're on, they all have different algorithms, the way they go about
Right.
pushing things out to you. But I know with TikTok, that's definitely something like when I went on a cruise, I was looking up all these, like tips, trips or whatever on what not to do, like traveling solo on a cruise. So then next thing you know, every other video I scrolled on had to do with Carnival cruise line.
Yeah. You're
Like
like,
some of these
please
videos are like
no.
years old too. It's like it
Yeah.
doesn't even matter like how timely the content is.
Right.
You might see something that pops up that's like years old and start to believe that this is something that happened yesterday, when in
Right.
actuality this is something that happened ages ago and it's not even an issue anymore. And I think it's really important that people just trust your gut that it's okay to go and Google search something. Like
Mhm.
when you go to Google, you can find a little bit more instead of just taking things at face value. And I think with detecting like fake news and stuff like that, some people, and maybe this is for like older audiences who aren't as, informed or up to date on how fake news looks, or like, you would get those emails and text messages that are clearly spam, and learning how to identify what specifically is alarming within that. How can people protect themselves from falling for those false or misleading headlines that we see online?
I think, and I feel like it happens more so with national and like world news headlines actually, and that's why it's like hard for me to think about because I don't see it as much with like my hyper local news besides just a few times it does happen, but to be aware would just be to check other things. And I have to do this too because I will like sometimes stuff will come up and it'll panic you. Even on
Yes.
like, and I don't use X a lot, but I do like we with the Iran stuff because my senators will post on there and things like that. So I'll start scrolling on there, and the way I'm because I'm not active on it, it just like puts a lot of like I just follow mainly representatives and stuff like that. So my point is it'll just the way it works now is it's not just fear following, it'll feed me a bunch of stuff and it'll be like scary little headlines that I'm like, is this true? Like, because with everything that's going on, I mean, it's very worrisome.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and there's all this different stuff that people will just comment or post, and it'll get a lot of interaction and stuff. So I think going and just checking like a news outlet that you trust, whatever that may be, or multiple, and just reading through what they're sharing from their reporters who may be there or their correspondents that, for example, work in DC and are getting information from the source. And then you just kind of have to let go and just not engage with it because if you start to go, you can go down any rabbit hole you want to go down. And it's really easy now. So I would just say, figure out what you can confirm is true and then just move on because if you just spend your whole day or spend a bunch of time or going down and reading a bunch of reading or watching a bunch of stuff that may or may not be true, then it's just not worth your time and it's easy to do.
Yeah, it's really easy to do that. And what I want to point out that you said is like looking for the source, like
Mm.
people who are talking to the source. And I think
Yeah,
that's probably the biggest thing that people should be considering when they are seeing these stories, whether they be on TikTok, Instagram, or X. Facebook, even. Are these people actually talking to the source? No. Okay. Well, then let's go to the internet. Let's do our search and let's see people who are talking to the source and what they are saying. And those people that are those important people that are surrounding the story, whether that be elected officials, because a lot of times we see stuff online where people kind of fabricate what was said, and then you go and look online at their exact statement. It's like that was kind of taken out of context, or they use a snippet of what someone said, which again can be taken out of context and give you a different impression based on what's really actually being said.
right. And I think, and something for me is and we know this, like you say, we say it all the time, or like, when you watch Fox News or MSNBC, there's going to be people who are commentators more so than journalistic reporters. And I
Mm.
think sometimes it can be hard online, maybe to decipher who's like more of a commentator or who's more of a journalistic reporter. And you have a lot of commentators that are
Yeah.
putting opinions and things like that. And so just knowing, okay, this is someone's opinion. I'm looking for the facts, is really important. So, or it's important if that's what you're looking for. I will say, I sometimes like to listen to like super far right people and then super far left people because it's interesting to me. So, I'm not saying you can't ever do that. If you like hearing more in-depth discussions that are opinions, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're just looking for the facts of a situation, then yeah, you just need to go and get with that person who is talking to the source.
Yeah, it's
But
definitely hard for people to possibly see the difference in between that, because we do get a lot of stations like Fox or MSNBC and even CNN where they bring
Mhm.
on political commentators who are
Right.
very opinionated, who lean one way or the other. And, when they're posting these clips, whether it be on the internet or you're watching it on TV live, it can be hard to decipher, like, oh, what is what, and looking for the facts. Basically, the facts are just the information. When we remove the emotion and everything else out of it, which is a lot of what these commentators are giving, that's when you're going to get the facts. And I too am like you. I have a lot of people who are both far right, far left on social media. From just like, I went to so many different schools growing up, I've lived a little bit all over the place. And so
Right. Yeah, you have been everywhere.
I've lived everywhere, so I have people that are on both sides. And, a lot of people get to the point where they just like block people or delete them off their social media. But
Yeah.
I kind of use it as a case study.
Yeah, me too.
And
I
I'm
love
just so curious to better understand, the reason, or, just understand the way that you think
it.
and
Hmm.
the way that you process this information that's being brought to us in live time, and what your take is on it. So I tend to stay away from deleting people like that. There are
Me
some
too.
people who take it a little overboard where I'm like, all right, this is enough and you're not really adding much value. My case study has ended with you.
Yeah.
But I think it helps keep me very in the middle, like you're supposed to be as a journalist. You're supposed to be objective. You're supposed to just be reporting the facts and to be able to see both sides, because at the end of the day, that's what you're supposed to be doing. And reporting is reporting both sides. A lot of times there's three sides to the story, and really getting a better overview and picture of what all is happening and how you can better create your own opinion. At the end of the day, you're consuming the news to be able to create an opinion yourself of how something might impact you and what you need to do about it. Sometimes it's not necessarily anything immediate, but at the local level, a lot of times it is. Those are more actionable, stories that you're going to get. There's news coming up that there's a festival coming in town this weekend. Okay, now I can make up my mind on whether or not I want to get involved in that, rather
Right.
than, national news, bigger topics that are happening. Then you're kind of like, okay, well, there's nothing really actionable here for me as a regular citizen. but I can still form my own opinion and the way that I go about having conversations about it and making sure that you're bringing up what's true.
Right. Yeah, I think that's great. Great advice.
You mentioned when we talked before that you too have kind of blocked certain people on social media because of the emotional tolls that certain posts can have on you, which I'm right there with you. What
Yeah.
boundaries do you set when it comes to staying informed without being drained?
Well, and this is funny because I got guilty of it yesterday watching something. And this was actually from a news station that had interviewed a sheriff, and just the facts of the story made me really emotional because it involved a child being left in a hot car, which, is just horrible. And then having a baby, it was a baby the same age as my son. And I was like, that's crazy that a parent would do that. Anyways, but for me, it's more so of the trauma dumping that we see, and not to people have different ways of coping with things and they like to share. And it's an amazing thing the way that we can connect and share. Um, on social media. And so, and getting the word out, maybe if you need to raise money for something and things like that. But for me, like, I cannot personally handle knowing about, especially children, every child that has cancer or every strange disease that impacts children that may be super rare and probably will never happen to my child, or every drowning. Like, I don't need to know about every heartache that every family goes through, and you don't either, and that's one
Mm-hmm.
of the things I almost feel bad, like, I'm not trying to just block this person, because I do feel bad and feel empathy for what they're going through, but I personally can't take that because I carry that with me, and it's not normal. Like, it shouldn't be normal. It kind of is normal now, but you don't have to carry that stuff with you. And so for me, I start to engage with mom content, and so sometimes I'll engage with that stuff, and more, like you said, more and more will come up for me. So I just have to block people because like, there's certain trends that are really sad and stuff, and I just don't need
Mm-hmm.
to see that. I have a son and I have a family to worry about. And what I wanted to share for listeners was my encouragement with what you see in the news, because we do share sad stuff all of the time and things like that. And my husband gave me this advice a while back, and it really stood out to me: is you may not be able to donate to everyone's GoFundMe, and you are not responsible to carry everyone's burden, but I hope that when we do share stories and something pulls on your heartstrings, that you think of the people that you can reach in your own life, and that's your friends, your family, your community, and think of ways that you can be there for them when they need you. And that's your service, more so than feeling like you have to go to every charity event or just grieve for every family. We tell you stuff because it's important and it impacts you because it impacted someone in your community, but you are not responsible for the weight of everyone's trials, because everyone does go through trials. So just to take that with a grain of salt, and if you feel so compelled to help, great, that's amazing. If you have the opportunity, amazing. If you don't, like, call your sister and make sure that she knows that you love her, and just think of ways that you can help those that you can reach. And he brought that up to me because I just used to get so, like, I just want to help everyone, and you just can't. And you don't need to. You can reach the people that are within your grasp.
Yeah, that's really beautifully said, and I love that he shared that with you because when you're consuming all of this content, and especially if it's something that's, pulling on those emotional strings and getting you very entangled in it, it's hard to separate yourself from it. And I think the whole point of it really is to be informed and
Mhm.
informing others. Like, that is your
Yeah.
service. You don't necessarily have to donate the money. Like, there's plenty
Right.
of things that I've seen online that are like so sad, like sad stories of kids that have diagnoses of things, and they need money for surgery, and it's sad. It is really sad. And a lot of times we do want to help, but we can't help everyone. And
Right.
what you can do is do your your part in staying informed and
Mhm.
up to date on like these kinds of things. So when you do hear these stories and you know someone that this might impact, it might not impact you directly, but it impacts you because one of your close friends has a child that deals with something like, I don't have kids.
Right. Right.
But I have plenty of friends that do, that I'm going to share stuff with, who don't regularly consume news, so that
Right.
they're in the know. And
Right.
I'm able to do my part by being a part of the community and sharing this knowledge and information so that they're better able to make decisions for themselves. And you don't have to get tied into that and kind of spiral and feel like you're helpless or like there's nothing you can do. It is actually a big thing that you can share news. And that's something that I really still to this day with sharing stuff with my family and friends. Like that's something that I do
Yeah.
regularly. I see something and I'm like, okay, hey, this is this. Just so you know, people kind of rely on me to do that and
Right.
update them on what's going on. They'll be like, so what's going on with this situation? Being
Right.
able to break it down a little bit. And you're not going to be able to do that for all topics if you're not someone that's very well versed in news and whether it's politics or whatever area, industry that it's being discussed. But just simply sharing does a lot more than you think.
Right. Yeah. And like back to the mom thing, just super quick, like it's important for you to know, like maybe, for example, in recent headlines, measles may be going around in your community, or we have West Nile virus cases that popped up. That's important for a parent to know. What's not important is like some woman in on the other side of the world that her child had some rare disease that you're probably never going to be impacted by, you don't
Hmm.
necessarily, it's okay. I mean, if you want to know that, great. But if that's a lot for you, it's not going to impact you. So you don't necessarily need to consume that and be aware of that. So there's just different things.
Right. And every story you see may not necessarily come from a news outlet. And I think that's really
Right,
important too to think
right,
about, because with the internet and the way that it's, just been as advanced as it has been, that's great. But everyone kind of has the opportunity to post stuff online. And, with people liking, sharing, it can go viral and it can almost appear as like some credible person or organization when it's not even someone that's actually reporting news. They're just putting their own stories together, nonprofits
right,
and stuff like that.
right,
I work with a nonprofit to help them put stories together to put in their newsletter. There's so
right,
many different types of companies that are putting things and content online, and even just individuals in general that are putting things online. And so being able to just kind of differentiate between those two, like, okay, wow, this is something that's happening somewhere completely different than where I am. And these
right,
stories are going to pop up, but being aware of how engaged you're getting based on what that direct tie in is for you.
right.
When we do stories as a journalist, you're thinking of the 5 W's and the H: who, what, where,
Yeah,
when, why, how, and maybe taking that approach to really decipher whether it's something before you get too engaged and drawn into and stressed out about thinking about, okay, so who does this impact? What does it do to me? Where is this happening? When did this happen? Because this could be 30 years ago and it's just popping up now and it seems like really relevant suddenly. Why is this important? And how is this impacting me? Thinking about the 5 W's and the H and what we use to be able to formulate a story, thinking about when you go out, before you start talking to people and interviewing people, really putting all the pieces together, and maybe as someone that's consuming it, using that same strategy, putting those 5 W's, the who, what, where, when, why, and the H, how, applying that to your own life before you decide to
yeah,
get overly entangled in something. Like, who is this impacting? Okay, yeah, it might not impact me, but maybe it might impact like my mother or something like that. Okay, well,
right.
what is the story? Like, what are they trying to tell me? Okay, where did this happen?
Hmm.
Did this happen? Because again, a lot of these things that we see can pop up and go viral like years later. Like TikTok
Yeah,
has a thing where, these sounds that people are using, like audio and music, are from artists who have published music like 10 years ago.
Hmm.
And suddenly, like, people are like, oh, this new TikTok song. And it's like, no, it's not a new TikTok song. It's actually
Right.
10 years old. And just thinking of the timeliness behind it, the when, and why is it important, and how does it impact you? And really thinking of that before you choose to get overly involved in something that could really just not be on your plate.
Yeah, that's great advice.
If someone is listening and they're starting to feel burned out, but they still want to stay aware, they still want to be in the know of what's going on, what is like one small shift that you would suggest they make?
Yeah, if you just need to read some headlines, like you can even go to your TV news outlets homepage and they'll have the top stories for that day. And you can just kind of skim, or your local newspaper that has stuff online. They'll have stuff. I would say do that if you're like trying emotionally not to get too involved, because then you can just, if something jumps out at you and you want to pay attention to it, then you can, or read more about it, then you can. And then you can always watch your local news and just watch like 30 minutes or 15 even. Really, the first block is like 10 minutes, and that's going to have your most important headlines. And then move on with your day. Just find something that works for you just to check in on things.
Yeah.
Maybe 4 or 5 days a week, or less if you need to, 3 days a week, maybe every other day, 3 days a week, just to kind of know what's going on. That's what I would say.
That's really good advice. And something that comes to mind when you talked about skimming the headlines is that I think it's like journalism, like the 110, like the history behind and the principles of journalism that everyone had to take at Cronkite, and how that was the first course that you had that really put in front of you how to learn how to read headlines and kind of skim the front pages of newspapers. And in those classes, they would quiz us when we came to class, and you had to pretty much prove that you read the headlines. You know, they weren't expecting you to go in depth and go into each and every single story, but they were expecting you to know what the headlines were for the day. And by doing that, it was, you know, the front pages of a couple different newspapers. And that's just a simple way to consume it without getting too deep. Like, you've got just enough to know what's going on without being intertwined in all the details.
Yeah, I think that's great. I agree.
Well, you've covered everything from silly circus stories to serious local crime in your time reporting as a journalist. What was your transition like going from more lifestyle content to what you're covering now, which is a little bit more serious and hard hitting news?
Did both. But I really, towards like the end of 2024, was when I was more so fully involved in more of a lifestyle. I wouldn't even say lifestyle, more so community, but super fun content. And then I've since started a new position where, like you said, I'm transitioning back. The transition has been good. It's been hard for me in some ways because I love that, and I love showing personality and highlighting people in the community. That's what I personally am passionate about when it comes to journalism, is people and the good things going on, because we do show a lot of that on your local news as well. And I think it's so special to highlight those people who just are doing great things or fun things or smart things, or, things that your family can get involved in. Um, Transitioning back into more just general assignment news and breaking news has been really a privilege too, because I work more with police again and law enforcement and different community members in that capacity. I will say I'm still on mornings. And so my main priority is going live every morning. And so I'm not doing major in-depth pieces right now. I don't have the time, but I just cover whatever the big headline is for the day. So I get a little bit of balance in both. But I do talk with police a lot. Poor people. Poor police officers. I always have to call them in the middle of the night when they're breaking news. But yeah, it's been really good. It's a privilege to do both. They're both important. One highlights, just important or situations happening in the community as far as crime and fires and whatnot. Other big headlines when we're in session. There's a legislation stuff that I'm covering. And then the other one is just highlighting good things. So they're different, but they both are have value.
They do. They both have value, and especially at the local level. And I think sometimes that gets missed. Like, it's really easy to keep up with what's happening nationally because those are like those are the big guys, you know? You turn on your TV and those are like very well known, and you're more likely maybe to get alerts because of those, like through the Apple News app where they push out those alerts where you're being informed about stories that are happening on a national level. But I think people often forget about local news and don't rely on it as much as they should. I think that's part of why we're seeing, people that comment on certain news stations, like local or national, where they're like, I haven't even heard this in my area because their job isn't necessarily to report local news. They're national. And so they're going to be covering topics that impact people on a large scale. It has to be more than know what's happening in Oklahoma City, unless it's like, God forbid, it's like another shooting or something like that. Then those are those kind of stories that get picked up, especially after the local news station is running with it. Then they start pulling some of those stories and putting someone on the ground out there to be able to add more context as to what we're seeing when those are kind of like national trends. And I just want to ask you, why do you think people, in your opinion, often overlook local news?
I think it's easy to do, especially, I mean, especially like around elections. Like we just had that election. I mean, now it was 6 months ago, but it feels like yesterday, kind of. And with everything going on overseas, which there's always something like we can say, like, oh, there's so much going on right now, but there really is always something national or international that's going on that we're following, and you're going to turn maybe to your national news outlets for that, and that's fine. Your local news, I think it gets overlooked. I guess just because I don't know. Because obviously I'm biased and I don't think it should be overlooked, but I think sometimes people, I guess, overlook the importance of local elections or local changes, local headlines. I think people do. I mean, here in Oklahoma, also, it's different. I will say, because a lot of people from Oklahoma, like, they do. Oklahoma's a weird market. A lot of people do watch the news, probably. I know it's like population wise a lot more than, for example, Arizona, because Arizona has a lot of people that have come from other places. So they don't have the loyalty. Whereas here in Oklahoma, a lot of people have lived in Oklahoma for a really long time, or they were born here. And so they have a lot of loyalty to the news stations more so than other
Hmm.
places. So that's what around right now. Whereas I know from friends that have worked in Arizona, and obviously we went to school in Arizona and I grew up in Arizona, that since, ooh, you're okay. Since they didn't grow up watching the news, or they just moved to there a year or two or three, they're not as invested, if that makes sense. Whereas here, people are actually pretty invested for the most part. And that's not everyone. We still have people who, like, I had just moved here 5 years ago now, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So it's a little different. But yeah, I think sometimes people overlook the importance. It's just the same way that people just don't vote in local elections the way that they do in when we have big national elections. They maybe don't show up to vote for their mayor or whatever it may be. But that person does impact them. I think sometimes people just don't think about it. So yeah, I'll stop there.
I do think people just aren't thinking about it. They're kind of tuning it out and just out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. And I can definitely say, as someone who has moved around a lot, it can be difficult when you move to a new area, just figuring things. First of all, you're just like figuring out life in general. Like, okay, let me get settled here. Chances are the last thing you really care about is what's happening in the news directly. And so taking that time to then get situated and figure out who your local news stations are and figuring out, when your local elections are, those kinds of things, getting your driver's license updated and then being able to actually participate in those elections is really important. And it's really easy to go through life and let life happen to you. But I think in this day and age, with the climate that we're seeing, it's so important that we take those steps to change your license. So then you can be able to vote. Or if you're not going to change your license right away, being able to get an absentee ballot and still staying up to date with what's happening in those areas. And something that I've done as a journalist, which some people could apply to their own lives, with choosing the way they go about getting involved and being informed, is using Google Alerts. Now, you can set Google Alerts for certain topics that you can get emailed on. Instead of feeling like you need to go look for it, you can have it come to you. And if those specific topics that you've put in pop up on Google, then you can get alerted on those. They can get annoying, but you can choose what frequency you're able to get updated on certain topics. And I think it's really important that people realize that you have agency over the way that you go about consuming and engaging news and content online. And the way that you go about doing that sets a precedent for, the types of changes that we see happen at your local level. Like Jordan was saying, those school board meetings, different elections, and even, like road closures. That's the kind of stuff you probably would see in the morning news, where Jordan's doing that and being up to date. And then you get on the road and you're like, oh my goodness, like, why didn't I know about this? Being in the know. And obviously, it's super overwhelming when there's so many different things going on, but there are ways to go about it where you can have a healthy relationship with news. And it's something that I am still actively practicing. I mean, Jordan mentioned it herself, like she's still actively practicing it and having to, turn it off from time to time and learn to disengage with certain content. Like, no one is perfect. We're always figuring it out. And that's the whole theme of this podcast, with being with Micah, navigating the chaos of life and adulthood and what comes along with it. And the news is how you go about figuring out what your day is going to look like, whether you realize it or not. The information that's popping up on your phone all day is some source of news that comes from journalism and is able to help you make better informed decisions. That's the whole purpose of it. So I just want to say thank you, Jordan, for being a part of this podcast. And I have one last question. I ask every guest this. What does it mean to you to be, especially as someone who walks the line between facts, emotions, and the responsibility of truth every day? What does it mean to be?
It is, for me, it's such a privilege to be able to do what I do, and I don't take it lightly. It's such a joy, especially interacting with so many people, and as a journalist, intercepting on some of the best and worst days of people's lives is just, it's an honor. And then as far as making sure people get the information, my faith is really important to me. And that I ask that the Lord guides me and that I would be truthful and be honest and work to the best of my ability every day to make sure that I'm doing my part to share the information and share it accurately and effectively and efficiently and not waste people's time. That's a big thing, especially as I've gotten older, that I don't like when newscasts have stories that waste people's time, maybe just to fill time or anything like that. I'm gonna get you the information that you need when you need it, and to the best of my ability. Sometimes I don't get answers from people right when I want them, or there's things I have to verify or and whatnot. But I just really enjoy it. I love it, and I don't feel like I've ever worked a day in my life, even doing this for 6 years now. So that's what it means to me.
Well, thank you. That's amazing. And just thank you again for the work that you do, because without you, people that do the work that you're doing on a day to day basis, we wouldn't have what we have today in this world where we're able to make decisions and have that agency over our own lives. There's lots of places in different parts of the world where news is controlled and only certain information is only able to be shared. And for us here in the United States, having all of the different channels that we have to go through to be able to consume information is really just a privilege. And I appreciate you so much for being here and joining me today and being able to break down how we can keep news from making us feel so overwhelmed. It can still challenge us, but overall, we're responsible and we can be curious and informed at the same time.
Yes, thank you so much, Micah. I think you make a great point. We are so blessed to have so many opportunities to hear different perspectives and ideas. So, thank you for your time. It was such an honor and a joy to be on your podcast, too. I really appreciate you reaching out to me. It means a lot.
Thank you, Jordan. I appreciate it. So, you guys heard it. Check your sources, balance your intake, and remember that being aware is one of the most powerful tools that you have, not just for yourself, but for your community too.
From muting notifications to curating your timeline, Jordan reminded us that staying informed doesn't have to mean that you need to be consumed. It's about checking in, not checking out, and making space for clarity over chaos. She also made a powerful point. Journalists have access that everyday content creators simply don't. While the internet is full of people reading headlines to you, real reporters can actually call up sources, verify facts, and bring context the average scroll just can't. So next time you feel overwhelmed by the noise, remember, you don't have to consume everything to care. You don't have to repost to be informed. And it's okay, healthy even, to take a breath and come back when you're ready. Thanks for being here and stay tuned. I've got more real, reflective, and rooted conversations coming your way soon. Until then, be well and be.